After 6:40 now, we're going to get started. Sorry for the delay. We were transitioning from ordinance to charter and rules. All right, let's take item 1 first.
Motion to take up item 1.
Second.
Item 1 is has been tabled once before. It is back to us again for discussion. I know that the mayor hoped to be able to attend and is not able to, so this may be something that we just open and then table. Ordered that we amend our charter and ordinances to change from an elected mayor to a city manager, chief administrative financial officer appointed by the city council.
So just briefly, if I may.
Yes, the maker of the order. Again, sorry, I am the chair. Councilor Meg McGrath-Smith. To my left is Councilor and City Council President Tessa Murphy-Ramboletti. And to my right is Councilor Linda Vacan, who's also on Charter and Rules. The maker of the order.
Thank you. So I just wanted to put in the record that I had a conversation with Mayor Garcia. During his campaign, he had talked about the various models of governance and that it might be worth having a conversation going forward as to what models might be good for our city. And so I touched base with him because it was on our agenda again. I wasn't sure when it would be coming up. And he thinks that, and I did let him know that I wasn't at all looking to move anything this year with everything we have going on already, but more to have a conversation to see about going forward what might make sense as we are starting to evaluate and create by ordinance some different qualifications and standards and look at our whole system a little bit. And he was warm to that concept and idea. And so I guess right now I'd just leave it right there and say that maybe we can talk further about it at a time maybe after budget and after all the intensity has gone by, where we could have a deeper discussion about what variations, or if any, might work. Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Any further discussion?
so I'll make a motion to table.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, I'd entertain a motion to take item 2 off the table.
Motion to take item 2.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
This is 4224, Bartley, Jordan, and Vacan. The City of Holyoke amends any charter ordinance and any other regulations relative to its tax collector and combines the office with its city treasurer so long as a charter change to appoint rather than elect Holyoke City Treasurer is approved by the legislature and Holyoke voters. I brought this item back up on the agenda more for a conversation around timeline. One of the questions around the will of the body is, do we want to start working on these provisions prior to the vote or wait till after? Because the vote will not occur until November, and then the position will be changing after that. And so the question is, do we want to wait until after the election? What's the will of the body in terms of just, do we set this in the jacket until after the election? Or would we want to continue this work in the meantime, presupposing let's have some groundwork ready if it is approved by the voter? Yes, Linda Vacan.
My initial reaction, and I'm not saying it couldn't change, but my initial reaction is that the voters might find that quite presumptuous of us to kind of go ahead like we already know what they're going to do. I don't know. That's the only thing that gives me a little bit of concern. But
it's more just knowing how slow the gears of government work. Is it also it's thoughtful and smart to start the conversations earlier rather than later? So, but I did want to air these.
No. It's a reasonable rationale, but yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
I agree. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to get too far down the road, just for a lot of reasons. I think there's other things that we could focus on. However, I don't think anything is stopping any of us from doing our own research. And, I think it's good that we had this on here so we can start to think about what that kind of a position could look like and what are some best practices or recommendations from whether it's the state or Mass Municipal Association. But I think the summer timing is good to start to do that research and then go from there, but not get too ahead of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Councilor Vacan.
Thank you. And the other thing is, while I supported this order, I also have ideas about other things, you know, and our current treasurer has indicated that if we do end up moving to the CAFO, he's indicated that he would resign so that the CAFO could be the treasurer and we would recognize some of these consolidations. So then I might want to move from this order to a different order also, because like everybody says, there's a lot of moving parts, right?
Yeah.
So, thank you. So I would like, if maybe there's other people that want to speak on it.
Yeah,
Councilor Devine.
I think the discussion is worthwhile. I think there's a lot of what ifs. You know, what if the ballot question doesn't pass? What if I think that's a main thing. And then what do we do if it does pass? The other thing that I've had a what if is, what if the treasurer and the tax collector are indeed combined? What happens to the employees? That's not me. The employees. Are they union employees? Are they confidential employees? I think that makes a difference. So I think that's a what if that we need to look at or have some legal opinion on that. Because if they are, something tells me that they're probably confidential employees so that that wouldn't be a problem. But if they're not confidential and they are union employees, I think we need to look into that as well.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
So I'd like to make a motion that we table it until November, which doesn't stop any of us from looking into things in the meantime.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, let's take
Motion
item
to take
3
up
off the table.
item 3.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
McGrath-Smith ordered that a home rule petition be filed with amendments to the city charter as required for consistency with state law pertaining to our city's restructuring of municipal finance. And I wanted to just read into the record that we did get a communication from our state representative, Pat Duffy, that the home rule petition legislation has been filed for the ballot question so that we can change or ask the voters if they're willing to change the treasurer position from elected to appointed, and that the number associated with it is HD 5173, an act establishing an appointed treasurer for the city of Holyoke, and that both Patricia Duffy and Senator Vilas are going to do their joint effort to track and move it when it gets to their respective chamber.
Thank you.
Great.
Unless we're wanting to discuss it further, I think it would make sense to give this
Motion
Call
to
it
comply
complied
with. Second.
Or
Or
I'll second it.
okay.
all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Motion to take item 4 off the
Motion to
table.
take up item
Second.
4.
All in favor?
Aye.
Jordane Bartley ordered that Charter Sections 19 and 34 be amended and elsewhere as appropriate to allow for all appointments to the Fire Commission and DPW Commission to be appointed by the mayor, subject to confirmation by the City Council. Under discussion.
So if I understood from Counselor Bartley, he wanted to hear from the mayor what his thinking is relative to this, because it certainly would be up to him if it's moved to him whether he would be accepting of it or not. So it seems like maybe this would be good to go on a meeting where the mayor could be here maybe, and not make him keep running around for one thing, but maybe put a couple or 2 or 3. I don't know if there's any other things on here for the Mayor Garcia, but that might make sense. So I'd make a motion to table until Mayor Garcia can come in.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to take up item 5.
Second.
Okay.
Oh.
Yep, a little bit long. We'll read it into the record so that people understand the rule that we're looking at. So this was from myself, McGrath-Smith. Ordered that City Council Rule 10C be revisited in discussion. C, City Council shall appoint a youth ambassador to the City Council. The term shall last 1 year, starting July 1 to June 30th. Appointees shall only be eligible to serve 1 term. Individuals eligible for this position must be a Holyoke resident, enrolled in a local high school or equivalent program, and be in the range of 15 to 17 years of age. The youth ambassador shall be required to attend all full City Council meetings and may attend any subcommittee meetings, as well as be allowed to speak during the public comment period, attend all regular meetings of the City Council and whichever subcommittee meetings they would like, give a youth ambassador report at the beginning of the first meeting of every month, updating the council about the youth community, positive or negative, similar to the president's report. Request that a city councilor file an order to give a proclamation to a young person or someone who works with city youth. Sit in council chambers and assist the administrative assistant during full council meetings and any subcommittee meetings. Attend youth-related events on behalf of the city council, meet with youth in other municipalities, sit at the committee table during regular meetings, and sit at the committee table during regular meetings. Selection process. Opening for youth ambassador position shall be posted for 2 to 3 weeks. Youth will apply through their guidance counselor, who will then screen the applicants and forward qualified resumes to the city council. All qualifying candidates will be interviewed by Public Service and Human Resources Committee and provide 2 letters of recommendation. First candidate to reach 8 votes by full council shall get the position. Individual chosen for position is subject to removal upon 2/3 vote of the city council. This is one of those rules that has been in 10, which is the miscellaneous section of the rules, and has become defunct. I'm interested to know if anyone here remembers when this was followed and what it was like, if it was successful or not successful, and any understanding of why the rule became defunct. And then for us to have a conversation around if we would like to remove this rule, which we are currently not following, whether we would like to amend it in some way and bring it back in a functional, format, or if we would ship it to another committee for them to consider, like the joint committee, which is what we did for the Pledge of Allegiance. But I'd love to hear from this body on what was this like when it was done, and did it work? What was the benefit of it, and why did it fall apart as something that was done regularly? I see Councilor Devine's hand.
I believe it was Councilor Vega at the time. I don't know if he made the rule or tried to go along with the rule, and I do believe we had one student here, and I'm pretty sure they sat over there. It wasn't as involved as this, The student was here, and then he wasn't. That's all I can tell you. He was here, and then he wasn't, and then it just dropped.
So it only really happened for one student, one session, and
Pretty
then
much
fell out
that I
of
recall, yeah.
use.
And,
Yeah.
Councilor Bacon.
and my recollection is pretty much the same.
Okay.
And it just seemed like maybe it was kind of an awkward way to try to involve the youth in municipal activity. And just reading the rule, it's very cumbersome. It's almost like applying for a job, right? And I just think maybe we could come up with simpler and as meaningful ways to involve the youth. And maybe we could give this rule leave to withdraw at this point.
Yes.
I echo what others have said. I mean, I think the spirit of the rule and the intention of it was great. And it is important to include the youth voice and opinion in civic municipal government. But I agree that when I read that rule, when I first got on the city council, I was like, oh wow, that's a lot to ask of a high school student. And I was a part of all of the things in high school, and even reading that, that was intimidating. So I can see how it was probably a lot for a student to commit to. And I do think the school committee does something similar, and maybe that's something that we could incorporate into our meetings. Maybe it's at the beginning of the meeting, or it's a communication that's sent to me and I read it in the president's report. whatever works, but I can appreciate like having the rule exist and we're not following it and we're not really able to. It doesn't seem productive. So I'm definitely. Is it giving leave to withdraw to a rule, or how does that? I don't know.
We would have
actually,
to vote to remove the rule.
What is the number
And then
of
bring that recommendation for removal to city council. I will say that the school committee, has two main pieces that are student facing or youth facing to their meetings. They have a student spotlight that always exists, where a group from a school is invited in to share the good news or good work. Could be a sports accomplishment, an academic, project that they did for the community. They come in and they share it. And then there are also two students who sit on the school committee who are able to weigh in, who are able to communicate, who are there observing the making of school policies and rules. So I will say that we do have a role similar to this already in our governance structure. It's just on the school committee side instead of the city council side. And it may be that because of the school committee's close involvement with the school and their very, school-driven mission, they're closer to the administrators and to the groups that they would then regularly engage with and invite in to be, to be participating in that way. So I'm not sure if this feels redundant. I do know that from talking to a few folks, it felt really hard to maintain. And similar to the Pledge of Allegiance concern, we could ask our administrative assistant to kind of step into developing that, but it does feel like a big ask. And it is something that you can't set up once and then it kind of just goes. That person that needs to be checked in with and supported to be in this room and a part of council in an appropriate, productive way. When that person then cannot attend, they have to find another person. Like, it's a structure. And it strikes me that the maintenance was the issue. There was a lot of effort to sort of launch it. And then once that original student stepped down, trying to sustain it. To sustain it was hard because we do not, as a body, have a school-driven mission. And so it felt hard to ask the council and the administrative assistant to make that a focus area. That being said, I don't want to discourage youth to be involved. And it may just be that the way that this is currently written, this does not serve the council or is not possible for the council to maintain. That doesn't prevent somebody else from filing a new order with their own understanding of something that feels manageable and doable and their sort of passion project to launch it.
Right.
Because I do think it takes someone who has a very clear vision and purpose, who can bring it to council and want to run it. The tricky part, of course, too, is then creating a structure that can outlive that one initial counselor's passion for it and become something that really becomes part of what is done here.
Right.
I'm happy to bring it to council with the recommendation that we remove the rule.
Without prejudice.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't come across negatively because it's not intended to.
Just to name that it's been a defunct rule for a long time. And there's little purpose in having rules in our rules that we're not following. I do think that there has to be some foundational understanding that the rules that we have matter. We have to follow them. If we have something in here that we're regularly ignoring, I think that that's not a good idea. And if somebody else on council has a really good understanding, or if we bring this to the full council and they say, nope, we don't want to give this leave to withdraw. I know, city councilor X, I have a vision for this. I want to amend this and this, and I want to move this forward.
There's no shy retiring people on the council.
There's nothing to stop another counselor from saying that and then us being able to move forward in some way. But the rule as it is right now, we are not following it, nor do we seem in a place to be ready to relaunch it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Counselor Devine?
I just have one, the last sentence. First candidate to reach 8 votes by the full city council shall get the position. Can you imagine individuals chosen for the position is subject to removal upon 2/3 vote of the city council? I can't even imagine that we'd have some high school kid say, you're gone, you know? So I'm with you, and without prejudice is a good idea, because that means you can take it up again.
So I'll make that motion if you like.
Yes.
And I will second.
Do you want to state the motion again into the record so
Okay.
it's clear for the minutes?
Okay, that we remove Rule 10C from the city council rules without prejudice. And then you can do the
Second.
background.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Motion to take up item 6.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 6, 11822, Murphy, Ramboletti, and Jordan. Order that the city council adopt a rule to establish a 2-year legislative term. Any orders pending in committee or not acted on by the end of the legislative term must be refiled at the start of the subsequent legislative term. Can we, I don't see Solicitor Bissonnette on Zoom.
No.
Okay. So from my understanding, there he is. Okay. Your name is Council Chambers. That's why I wasn't sure on Zoom. All right. Solicitor Bissonnette, can you talk us through, have you created language? Because that was the piece that we were waiting for, why we tabled it on May 13th. It's just waiting for your guidance on how to do this, but not have it negatively affect processes that are in place and are moving on a timeline that is required.
Two most important things are special permits and zoning issues, because there's a timeline required on both of those. So I'm really working with Attorney Mantaleski, who handles that stuff for planning, so that we can coordinate and make sure we've got this on the same page. But that's really the only holdup. The other suggestion that was made was to begin a numbering system based on the year. So the first order would be 23-1, 23-2, and so on as a way of tracking it. I'll leave that to Jeffrey, who has that, because I'm sensitive to adding anything to his workload, but I think that may be a better way for us to track some stuff. But with regard to the order itself, I don't think there's much of a doubt that there needs to be a 2-year turnover. It becomes difficult because you've got folks that are frankly going to start hearing one thing in August or September or October, and they may not be around in January or February for the vote. So we're trying to weigh in how that might work as well, not so much for remaining members, but for new members who would not have benefited. There's a rule that allows members who weren't at a meeting to look at a tape for one meeting. So we're trying to see how that might play in. And then again, we have all new committees, new term, new committee membership, so that's also a piece. So we'll continue to work on that. Hopefully we can get a resolution. Jane has concerns and I do as well, so we'll try to work them out.
Councilor Murphy Ramboletti?
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you for really looking into this. I know that this is something we've been discussing for a while, and I really don't want to rush it, because I understand that there are good intentions about this order that Councilor Jordan and I filed, and I don't want to make things more complicated. So even though it may take longer for us to make sure we're doing it the right way, I do appreciate the research. So that's all. Thank you.
Councilor Bacon?
Thank you.
One other point, I'm sorry, Councilor Bacon.
go ahead.
One other point to consider is we're looking at exclusions from the 2-year rule for those things which statutorily must be rolled over. And so it would name them and provide sort of the state reference as to why they're excluded. That seems to be the direction we're moving in. I apologize, Councilor Bacon.
So I was only going to comment that at one point I had seen a rule in another city council that addressed this, that did handle it this way. I couldn't put my hands on the language again, though, but they had carved out some of the exceptions, similar to what Attorney Bissonette is speaking to. But in general, especially having chaired Ordinance Committee for a little while, there's so many things in the jacket, and they're so old. I would have 3 pages to clean up the jacket, just giving things leave to withdraw. And it almost seemed just sort of like a waste of time to do the exercise and just taking up a lot of space on an agenda. Because there really, other than at our last meeting where a few things did get sent back to committee, just because I guess people didn't expect them, I've rarely seen anybody say, oh no, keep that. You know, and so I think it is a good intention, and I think it will help Jeffrey not have to sort through a lot of ancient history going forward too, if we're able to, you know, get some good language together, which I feel confident we will. So anyway, thanks.
So just to recap, I'm hearing that, Mike, you're working on language with Jane that you'll bring to hopefully our next meeting, which I don't believe will be until the first or second week of August. And to that meeting, you would bring the language so that we could look at a resolution that would create some exclusions to the 2-year rule concerning statutorily required timelines around special permits and zoning issues, and also the ability for a sitting councilor to ask for an item to be refiled. Right? That was also one of your requirements from the last meeting. Yes, Councilor Bacon?
Well, yeah, and I mean, anybody can refile anything, right?
That's true.
So we don't really need a
Okay.
rule on it, right? It's just more a point.
Yeah, but we had talked about instead of having to go through the regular filing process, you could just name for it not to be removed.
Right, for people that were continuing into
Yes.
the next term. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair thing for people who might have concerns about having to track and refile. Yeah, because sometimes the time does go by and you forget what you filed unless you go back into all your archives yourself. And that's time consuming, so,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, so do I hear a motion to table until our next meeting?
So moved. Table to August
Yes. Pending legal language.
for language.
Yep.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, item
Motion to
7.
take up item 7?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So this is January 17th, 2023 from McGee. Ordered that City Council Rule 9H be amended and reworded in order to make the process of changing or updating an ordinance a smoother process. So City Council Rule 9H. Jeffrey, is it possible for you to project that rule on the screen for us?
Working on it right now, actually.
Thank you. So I would love to, this clearly has been taken up twice before. It was tabled in February of 2023 and in December of 2023, but hasn't been brought up since then. I would love to hear from folks in the room who remember that conversation, or from or from Solicitor Bissonette. What were the main issues with 9H that were discussed at that time that we would like to address now? And thank you for putting that up for us, Jeffrey.
So
Okay.
there has been a discussion about the proper role of the law department in the creation of ordinances. Sometimes there's confusion as to what the full scope of the law department's input should be. My response is usually that we don't do policy, you do policy. Our job is to see legally where it can fit, if it can fit, if it's legal to do so. And as we look at a rule like 9H, it starts off with talking about a draft. And generally speaking, there are no drafts. There are orders that that go to committees. And from the committee, there usually is a request to draft an ordinance. And so that begins the back and forth. And out of that, the structure the way it is now, generally, law department puts forward an ordinance, which is in a draft. That draft is discussed by the ordinance committee and then sent back to legal, could be amended on the floor of the committee and referred to the full council. But this bounce back is what I think causes problem. The idea of the law department rejecting it and then having this whole thing go through the city clerk and back to the city council, that seems to me to be ancient. Seems to me to be of a bygone era. I would think that if we talk this one through, we probably could figure out a much better way to move some of these things through the system a bit quicker, get them out of the jacket, get them off the agendas, get them into the ordinance books. But I think it's fairly easily resolved if we can figure out how to get something before the committee that's already in draft form, which would at least eliminate under 9H, the current first meeting. And we can talk about some other considerations on how to move language forward. But, we can put together ordinances for the committee's consideration if that's what would be wanted. We can also, if a member comes and says, I'd like to do an order on such and such, we can work with you to draft one that you can submit as your own order, and then we can work on the details of that in committee. So those are my thoughts, Madam Chairman, on 9H.
Just for a little more context, let me see your hand too, Solicitor, Councilor Bacon. From a layman's reading of this, I will say that when I read this, it doesn't seem to be the process that we're following unless there's been some interesting interpretive gymnastics done around what some of the language means. And that may be the case. There may be just such a precedent of what the language means and what we've agreed to collectively define it as meaning that it's worked. But the way that it reads is that the committee on ordinance is drafting the language and then submitting it to the city councilor for, the city solicitor for examination and approval. And that if it's not, then it's returned to ordinance as if ordinance is the one making the changes in the document. And then once city councilor has, city solicitor has approved it, then they send it to the clerk and then it's mailed to everyone's houses 2 days before a meeting. There's so many things in that is not what we seem to be doing, which seems now to be that often in committee meetings, we're having discussions about what we want legal to create. We're asking legal to create it. Legal then creates a draft, gives it to us. We mark it up and debate and discuss it. We tell them to go make changes based on our conversation. Sometimes they're very specific about what we want. Sometimes we want them to interpret what we want from the conversation as a whole. And then it comes back to us again for us to approve it. And at that point, we move it to council. That seems a very different process than what's named here in 9H. Councilor Bacon?
Thank you. So 9H is really focused on when legal finds something that we want them to put in legal form to be out of order, that they find it not to be legal. And so they want to advise us that what we want to do is disapproved by them in terms of their recommendation to us. I mean, that's the main thrust of 9H. The other rules, under J as an example, says that ordinances shall not be drawn into legal form unless the ordinance committee has taken a vote on the matter. And so it's clear that the committee should be requesting legal to put things into legal form. And then that becomes a draft. There have been times in the past where we've been provided with drafts ahead of time. There have been times we've asked for them. It's been a little murky in how it's done, but the rules are pretty clear in that regard. But in 9H, it's a little messy because we're talking about one, and it could be a majority vote or a minority vote that has requested a legal form. And the complicating part to me and the confusing part was that if they disapproved of the form, then they had to go back to the clerk, and the clerk comes to the council. And if it's legal, my suggestion would be that when ordinance requests a legal form, if legal finds it not to be in order and they disapprove of it, that they would communicate that right back to the committee directly, because nothing is going to the council till it gets voted out of committee anyway, right? And I mean, then the council, if they really want to move something, can pull something out of committee. I mean, that's not typical, but it happens from time to time. So, but that seems to be the real convoluted part, when the law department doesn't agree with what ordinance wants to do. And it seems like they could just tell us right out the gate. I don't know. But I don't know if there's a law on this. It's just been there since I've been here, so.
Well, I wondered, to your point, is there a statute or a law in it? I wondered the 2 days of mailing. I wondered if that was actually something that we were required to do. Because I know that earlier in this term, we tried to take up, can we use email as a notification requirement? And the answer was, not really.
Right.
Because there are state statutes that are requiring items still to be mailed, and maybe they will be updated at some point, but right now it's not. So I do wonder, maybe we can ask Solicitor Bissonnette to weigh in on which pieces of this are aligned to state statute that we cannot change versus which pieces are up to us.
You've got to read it in tandem with the open meeting law requirements of 48 hours notice. So I think that's part of where that might have come from. But it would seem to me that this whole involvement of the city clerk could be eliminated. There's really no need for that part of the process, because it goes back to the council as a report from the solicitor. The council can either change the proposal as recommended by the solicitor or not. It really doesn't call for any involvement with the clerk other than providing notice. And that, I think that's something that, we can just make it consistent with state law. State law is now being considered for a change to formally and permanently adopt many of the rules that were put in place during the pandemic, most notably the remote permission to which I meet with you tonight, and also several of the rules regarding notice electronically. So I think there's a number of things that the Mass Municipal has been pushing that are also in that municipal empowerment bill that just had the property tax surcharge removed by the House, but also has many provisions that are much like working on notice, working on public hearings, working on email approval for notices that way. So that may be coming out shortly with approval this summer. So hope is there that we can use that in tandem with some corrections here to 9H.
So should we table till we get the updated state?
Yeah, I do like the point from Solicitor Bissonnette that the Municipal Empowerment Act may be addressing these issues that we're having around notice and email. But even before that, is it possible to ask for updated language, even if we can't address notice and email, but addressing the issue of the clerk? And then, Councilor Bacon, is there anything else that you particularly want to see in the new draft language?
No, I was just sort of taking out like the old legal language, like thereon and heretofore and
Forthwith.
You know what I mean? Just sort of putting it in plain English.
Who doesn't love a good forthwith?
I mean, I like it okay, but if you're looking to make it just more streamlined, that sort of helps to do it.
Yep.
And so, say for example, if we're looking at 9H, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down, I sort of changed it to say, city solicitors shall, well, we don't need forthwith, just say, examine the same, or examine the
Form.
whatever document. And if they disapprove of the form and legal character, that I think we need, because that's legalese, shall indicate their disapproval in writing and return the same to the committee. That's how I thought
Yeah.
we could hopefully handle it if it was legal. It just seems simpler.
Yep. Solicitor Bissonnette, is it if we table this, is it possible for you to work on language for our August meeting? Okay. I think you're muted. Solicitor Bissonnette, you're muted if you're speaking.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
I could see my lips moving and I could hear myself. Yes, I could have a draft on 9H ready for your next committee meeting.
Thank you. And then Jeffrey, I see your hand up. Do you have
Yeah,
information?
there's a technical detail I think I should just point out because it involves my part in this whole scenario, is the possibility of the city solicitor rejecting the legal form. So after you meet and you approve something, your expectation as a committee is that it's going in the committee reports for the next council meeting. But if the city solicitor is rejecting your language and kicking it back to the committee, there is no period between the committee meeting and the city council meeting for you to consider why they're rejecting it before the city council then is planning to meet to discuss the order.
Thank you. I think Councilor Bacon wants to respond.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeffrey. So I think if we're doing things in the proper order, we would request the legal form and we would get it back before it's sent to the council. And I think if there is a question of the law department thinking what we're doing is not legal, it seems they would let us know when we're asking them to draft the legal form, at least verbally, which then later we would want to get in writing because we'd want to understand why. So I think in those instances where legal has any concerns about what we might be sending over to council, they would want to make us at least aware so that then we would ask legal form to come back to committee before we would vote it out, say without a recommendation or with a minority recommendation. But I do think in this language, we should be sure that we do keep the majority and minority rights in terms of moving things forward. Because as Attorney Bissonnette also said, there is an opinion, but then the council can make a determination what action they want to take. And we have seen occasionally opinions at one time become a different opinion at a different time. So, I mean, it's just part of the reality of things moving forward. But I think that would be taken care of procedurally, Jeffrey, in a situation like that. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it's one of those things where practice seems to work better than the language of the rule does.
Yeah. Yeah, which is why we want to make it a little cleaner.
I have a question around when it says whether reported by a majority or a minority of said committee, and what does that mean in practice? What has that meant in the past?
So, if I may,
Yeah.
Typically, we have not had minority recommendations voted out to the full council to adopt an ordinance. Rather, what we've had is a majority vote of the committee with a minority dissenting. And then at council, the minority voters have given a minority report to make their case to the full council relative to it. But I think what's protected here is the ability of a minority on a committee to move an ordinance forward, even if the majority didn't want it.
I think that's my question, though. So currently in ordinance, when something comes up for a vote, if it gets voted down, then it doesn't move to full council.
Right.
So how does this rule interact with that?
So in that situation, say I'm say there's 5 of us here and I'm one of 2. I think it would be up to me as the minority voter to request legal to put what I wanted in legal form for the full council, even though the committee isn't voting it out in the majority. I think I would have to ask for that, because I don't think it would be on the chair to say, well, we have a 3-2 vote, but do it anyway, right? I think it would be, and we maybe want to clarify that in there upon request.
So
right?
I'm imagining something comes up, it's a 3-2 split vote, 3 people vote to reject something, 2 people vote for something. The minority then, can they just on their own go to the city solicitor and say, I need legal language? Or do they need to make a motion within the meeting to ask the city solicitor for the legal language, even though they're in the minority? Does the entire body have to vote on that?
So if we look at H and see what it says a draft of the blah, 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 ordinance to be reported to the city council by the committee on ordinances, whether reported by a majority or a minority of said committee, shall first be submitted by the committee to the city solicitor. So that to me says there would have to be a request, because they don't do anything without a request. And I think it would have to come through the chair. But that is a question that hasn't really ever come up that I can remember.
It's unclear to me
If
what
it
the
has, I don't
mechanism
remember it.
would be for someone in that moment to request it, and if they would need their committee's support in order to ask for the legal language despite having lost the vote, or if anyone, as a matter of personal privilege, can ask legal to put something into legal form even though they're in the majority of a vote.
So maybe if we could ask Attorney Bissonnette whether reported by a majority or a minority of said committee means, that would maybe help us. I don't think as a practical matter. But again, I haven't been on here the longest, so I don't claim to know.
I would love to know what that means, and also what does it mean in practice? What would the procedure be in order to do that?
Well, let's start with the fact that usually this is an up or down vote on a single ordinance. So it's not often there are competing orders or ordinances. We had one recently on the 2/3 vote, and law prepared 2 different orders. And we're happy to do that if there are competing languages. But usually it's not that way. Usually it's just one. So in that instance, the majority vote would be to defeat it by a vote of 1-2 or 2-3, say. But the ordinance itself would still be there. Whatever had been submitted and returned from the law department would be what you would be voting on. And the report from the committee would be that the majority report would be that it was defeated after debate. The minority report would be a request that the full council adopt the order despite the committee's request. So I think that was the intent of it. I wasn't here when it was adopted, but as I think about it and have considered it, I think that was the intent, to allow both sides where there is a close vote, and there may well be a majority on the full council that doesn't exist in the committee for something. But it's usually for an up or down vote on one thing or the other, not 2 separate proposals. I'm not sure if that clarifies or makes it more confusing, but I hope it helps.
No, that's clear.
I would
It's
want
just
to
that
preserve that.
I wish that it was clearer.
In
I think we've said it a few times. In practice, it seems to be working where we have an understanding of what works here and what needs to be changed. But what's in writing doesn't seem to match best practice. Okay, I'll look forward to looking to a draft in August, and then we'll move it from there.
So motion to table for some legal wording that is clearer than what we have. How's that?
Yes, there we go.
Second.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, all right. But so will the committee, then the next motion is to adjourn.
So move. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Good night.
Thanks, Mike.